So let's talk about the deliverables. I talked about your brand identity and what's included in the beginning. Here are some more specifics. So obviously you want your logo variations. So you have your main logo, you want to have an alternative version, either horizontal or vertical, maybe simplified, right? A little bit like without all the small stuff. So just a little simpler version. You want a round version, you want an icon, or again, just a simpler version of your logo. This is also a simpler version of the same logo. It's just different, you don't need all of those, but you want at least one simplified version. You also want to make sure, depending on what your logo is, that you get an inverted version that works well on a dark background. As an example, this is the main logo, right? If you put it on a dark background, and we just switch the color, we just switch the dark blue to white and the white to dark blue, the logo doesn't look right. We actually need to create a different logo that keeps the same style of the logo but works on the dark background as well. So just flipping the colors doesn't always work. In this case, it doesn't. And I actually needed to create a separate logo for that looks good on the dark background. You also want to make sure you have a one color version, so something that you can change, to either of the brand colors, any of the brand colors, or black or white. Okay, so that can also be important. So let's talk about file formats. Obviously, you want a JPEG and a PNG file. So those are pixel formats. You use them online. They come in RGB color space. PNG has a transparent background, and JPEG is just a simple image. So it usually has a white background. Now, depending on what you're getting, and this is part of your deliverables, you might also get a GIF, which is an animated version of your logo, or like a short movie, which is also animated, but it includes sound. So it's like auditory branding as well. Things like that are really fun and really useful if you create a lot of videos and you can just include the animated version of your logo in the beginning or the end of your video, right? So this is something to keep in mind. This is not very standard yet, but I definitely see this coming in the future. So something to think about, right? Videos are here to stay. How can you animate your logo? Other file formats are vector formats. You definitely want those as well, because they will help you with that. Those are the files you need for printing anything, whether it's business cards or posters, or even getting your logo in vinyl so you can put it on your window or on your car. Or if you want to get it screen printed on t-shirts, you will need vector formats. The main vector formats are either PDF and EPS. Those are the standard generic formats. Sometimes print shops also ask for AI format. This is Adobe Illustrator. EPS and PDF, you can open, they're universal. You can open them in different programs. AI, you can mostly open in Illustrator. So not everybody includes AI. And I don't think it's necessary. I don't understand why people ask for the AI format if they can also open EPS and PDF. But maybe there's a reason that I'm not aware of, that they can't open a PDF or EPS files. But those are vector formats, so that means they won't get pixelated. You can scale them to any size. You can print a banner with them. You can put them on a t-shirt. You can put them on a pencil if you want. Okay, you can scale them without any loss. So definitely ask for those. And if you don't have those, you need to get them from your designer. And then the special format is the SVG format. It's also a vector format, so it can get scaled, which is great. And it's really useful if you're using Canva to create any design for your business, because if you upload the SVG logo to Canva, you can actually change the colors of the logo within Canva. You don't have to upload a white logo and an orange logo or a light blue logo. You can just upload one of them and then change the color depending on your background just straight from within Canva. So it's a super useful logo format to have if you're using Canva a lot. So if you don't have that, ask your designer for that. Other deliverables that I think are important are your color palette that goes beyond just your logo colors. So usually logos should have 1, 2, or 3 colors max. Sometimes they have more. But what I see most of the time is that logo designers just include those 2 or 3 colors when they send the logo over. But if you actually create a full brand identity, you need more than 3 colors. So I recommend usually between 3 and 5 colors to start. You can have more. As you can see here, we have a primary color palette and a secondary palette. It's not necessary, and you don't want to go overboard and have the whole rainbow of colors unless that's your brand, because that makes it confusing again. So it depends a little bit on the experience of the designer. This is what I want you to think about when you create your color palette. I want you to make sure to include one dark color. In this case, we have at least 2, this one and this one. Those are really dark colors like this. They work well on light background for text. You want to make sure you have a high contrast between the lightest color and the darkest color, because you want your text to be very readable, even when it's small, like here. Okay? So one really dark color to use for text. You want one very light color to use as a background behind text. Obviously, there's white, but ideally you want to have other light colors as well, just for some variation. As you can see here, this is not a white background. So these would all be considered light colors, and you can put these dark colors on any of these and it would work. You can already see how many variations. You can have the dark blue on the light blue, you can have the dark blue on the white, you have the dark blue on the beige color, you can have the dark blue on the gray, you can have dark brown on any of those. So you have all those different variations that you can use, that you can create, and then you're still on brand, right? Number 3, you want one color that pops a bit, that creates a bit of contrast. So in our case, this is this terracotta color here and also this orange. They really stand out. So you want to use those colors depending on your brand. You want to use them for CTAs to highlight certain things, right? And number 4, you want a muted neutral color. So there's lots of muted colors here. Basically, all the other ones, except for those 2, are somewhat muted. This one is actually a little bit more muted too than this. This is a very bright color. This is somewhat in the middle. The other ones are very muted. It's for contrast. If everything is loud and bright, you won't be able to see anything, and you won't be able to direct the eye to the important things. So you want contrast. Think light and dark contrast, color contrast, bright colors and muted colors. Those are ways of directing where people are looking and directing them to the important parts of your design. You want to make sure that you get your main colors, so at least the logo colors, but the primary color palette, if you have more than 2 or 3 colors, you want them in different color codes. So your designer should give you this as well. You want CMYK codes for printing. So they look like this. You get 4 numbers usually for C, M, Y, and K. You want RGB and or hex codes for web and Canva. So RGB is 3 colors for R, G, and B, and the hex code is basically the same thing, just in a different system. But in Canva, it's easier to use the hex system. On websites, they often use that as well, but it's basically the same thing as RGB. Then light colors, it's different than printing colors. So if you are sending your logo to print somewhere for somebody to do business cards, they don't want the RGB logo. They want the CMYK logo. And they also need a vector logo and not a JPEG, because the JPEG is pixelated, so it can get fuzzy. And the last thing you probably want is, at least for the logo colors, is the Pantone color mix as well. So the Pantone is a special kinds of colors. They're pre-mixed colors. You can't express them as CMYK and RGB necessarily. Not all the Pantone colors can be expressed in CMYK and RGB because they're pre-mixed. So sometimes the Pantone colors are a little bit different when you actually see them than the CMYK and the RGB version. There can also be a difference between CMYK and RGB versions of your logo, depending on the colors you use, because not all of them are compatible. There are some colors that you can see on your screen on RGB that you cannot print. It's just not possible. And the same is true with Pantone. Pantone, for example, the Pantone system can include metallic colors, and it can include neon colors. They're pre-mixed colors that you just can't create with cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, because there's no metallic in there and there's no neon in there, right? So those are pre-mixed colors, and you can find the closest one that most matches your brand And you can that way also include colors for special occasions like gold, for example. So you can print those as well. Those are mostly used for example, when you're trying to find a vinyl color for a vinyl design for your car or for your window, or if you're looking for t-shirt colors, they often ask for Pantone colors as well for printing or finding the t-shirt color. Something else that should be included in the deliverables is your brand fonts. Now, the brand fonts is a little bit tricky. Two things I want you to remember there. Well, actually three. First one is don't use your main logo font as your headline fonts. So by main logo fonts, for example, I mean this font, the choice font here. If you use the same font for your headlines, the logo is just going to get lost. It's just going to look like another design element, but it's not. It's the most important thing. So we want the logo by itself, its own thing. And then find fonts that don't compete with that logo font. So my balanced brand font, for example, my logo font doesn't look anything like that. So for headlines, I use this handwritten font. You want brand fonts that express your brand identity. So again, they need to be matching your brand persona and the rest of your brand strategy, and they complement the logo. So you don't want something that's completely different from your logo. If you have this traditional looking logo with a serif font, and then you have, some crazy Art Deco, headline font, that might not work. Okay, they need to complement the logo, but don't compete with it. So you don't want you to use your logo font as your headline font. Now, you can use the secondary font you use in your logo, like the chiropractic font right here. You can use this as a copy font, for example, for your copy text. That's no problem. You can definitely do that. Just don't use the main logo font. And as I said, you want at least two different fonts, one for headlines and one for copy text. There can be more. I have 3 fonts for my brand, but the 2 are the minimum, I would say. Now, not every designer will make suggestions for that. This is something that you need to be clear on before you start working with the designer. Is this something that's included in the deliverables? Something else I want you to be clear about is that the designer will probably not supply you with the fonts themselves. Because again, it's a copyright thing. Unless the designer created their own font, the font is copyrighted and you get granted a license to use a font. So I buy a font and then I have the license. The designer allows me to use their font for my project and I install it on my computer, and that's what the license is for. I cannot just give you my font. You would actually have to purchase your own license for your font. So I can purchase the font for you and then give it to you, but then I couldn't use it anymore. Does that make sense? If I want to use the font, I have to pay for the license. I have to purchase my own license. And if you want to use the font, you have to purchase your own license. Or I can just purchase it for you and give it to you, but then I lose it. So this is something I want you to be clear about. I also want you to consider that there are premium fonts and that there are free fonts. Never use fonts that are just pre-installed on your computer, please. Don't do that. There are some free fonts on Canva, but you have to understand that Canva paid a license for these fonts as well. So you can use them as long as you're using them in Canva. But if you want to use the same font on your website, for example, you will have to buy a license to use it on the website. So usually what I do, I provide links to the fonts where my clients can purchase them. Some of them are free. Google has a lot of different fonts. But again, if you use the free fonts, there will be lots of other people who are using those as well. So for headlines, at least, I recommend finding a more premium font. It doesn't have to be a $500 font. If you go to Creative Market, there are plenty of fonts that don't cost more than $30. Maybe $50, maybe $100. That's not a whole lot of money for your own font. There will be still other people who use your font occasionally, but just because you paid some money for it, that number will be a lot smaller. So that's something I want you to keep in mind. And then another thing that you might get from your designer is a brand reference guide that you can share with other people that will be creating something for your brand. So ideally, you want somebody to put all this together, all the different logo variations, your color palette, your font, your brand elements, and put it together in a style guide of some sort, like a PDF or some other file, so you can easily share it with anybody who needs it. So a brand board is like a mini style guide. That's like the minimum, I would say, if you really get a full identity from somebody. And again, this is something you need to ask about. Do I get this at the end? Or do I just get my logo files? All right. Some designers only provide that. So just something to include in the contract and to ask about before you get started. If we create your logo, the brand style guide is included with your brand master guide. And the brand master guide actually serves as an example of how to use your brand. So it will be designed and branded using your visual identity. So, anybody that creates anything for you will have an example, like how do I actually apply those colors and how do I apply those fonts? And we provide it as a printed version as well. So you get a PDF of your style guide, but you also get a printed version of your brand master guide.